All right. Let's try this a second time. There we go. All right. So I was asked actually by ICOM to talk about this initiative, which initially grew out of a comment made at an ARF conference about 2 years ago by Jonathan Stoyer from Omnicom, saying, you know, we're out buying all these third-party digital data sets, and nobody knows what's in them. Wouldn't it be great if we just had something like the food label that is on your cereal box that tells you something about what's the nutrition value? So based upon that rather simple metaphor, this is the traditional food pyramid, which people who grew up in the United States would be familiar with, that gives you sort of what your recommended diet is. Based on this metaphor, we extended it, and this was through a collaboration with not only the ARF, but with SIM, the DMA, acquired subsequently by the ANA, and the IAB Tech Lab, basically created a data label prototype, and I'll take you through that. So the first part deals with who provided the data segment. So let's imagine these are like auto intenders. Where was it bought? How was it sourced in the first place? If you're buying this at retail, what audience segment is it, and exactly what, in plain English, what geography and what consumer target is being envisioned here. How was this constructed? And this is where the dirty details often show up of the amount of precision, the age of the component parts of the data target, whether it was sourced from cookie data, from website, from retail traffic data, from location data, what's the look-back window, all of those kinds of factors. And then finally, where all of these components came from, because sometimes a retail data target will actually be sourced from multiple sources. So I think you can agree this is not particularly easy necessarily. It's a lot of categorical level data that describes in some detail where a data segment was sourced, but the idea was that this at least takes a step in the direction of transparency. I'd say among the associations involved in this, the ARF was a little bit of an outlier because we always thought that this would be very difficult for a brand manager or a data manager in a company to actually use and interpret. And an example of that really comes from back in the food paradigm. If you look at the nutrition here on the avocado, 322 calories, 247 of which come from fat, might sound like the worst dietary choice compared to the Snickers bar, which is lower in calorie and lower in fat, but maybe not as healthy for you to eat. This extends over a little bit into the case here of two different competing audience segments, one of which looks as though it's more recent and it's constructed using supposedly superior deterministic modeling as opposed to audience number two, but in work that was reported a few weeks ago at the ARF conference in New York, actually audience two is the more pure in delivering the data target. So how can this actually happen? It happens partly because of all the factors on the slide here, the things that can actually be wrong with data sets, not just fraud and bad actors, but a weak ID graph, over-determined models, overextension, poor sourcing. And so, again, from the ARF's perspective and from the perspective of some of the companies that worked with us in creating the data label, companies like ODC, for example, which gave us this example of that I just showed you a moment ago of audience one and audience two. Many of us feel that what that we may have the wrong metaphor here, and that the food label isn't quite as good as maybe a thermometer metaphor, where you actually take a sample of any given data set that you're buying and see to what degree it reflects the target that's being claimed. So this would be an example here, again, from the new car buyer or auto intenders. So the concept here is that if you had a truth set of what was the incidence in the population of people in the market for a car right now, and this could be derived from a variety of sources, and you get a convergent estimate of that, then the question for any third-party data set that you buy is what's the percentage improvement on that probability relative to the base case of 100. And you can see here a test, again reported by ODC, in which many of the data sets in their experiment were significantly higher in their index for delivering auto intenders, but others were below. This doesn't correlate exactly to a data label. And so in our view, even though we are continuing to support the data labeling concept as a step in the service of disclosure, the ARF and other groups are working together to validate an approach that would allow something much simpler, a number that anyone could interpret. What's the percentage improvement over the baseline case of incidence in the general population? But any of you who want to sign up for the data label program, it's open for business. Just email that number, or if you want to collaborate with some of the others down at the bottom of the slide there in trying to develop a more a validity index or a composition index, then let me know about that. And that's it. Thank you.